I'll take over with Kaula, who is leading the effort on the research on our guiding principle to explain to you a little bit more what brought us to work on Basefugees and what is Basefugees and what is tech projects that we call responsible. My name is Louise. I've been working at Techfuji for the past 3 years as a global community coordinator, which means I'm in touch with the different teams of volunteers on the ground that we call chapters, who are both in resettlement countries like Canada, France, Italy, Germany, and also in countries neighboring forced displacement like Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, and Lebanon. And with our global community, we've been working since 2015 on challenging a status quo, being forcibly displaced persons, including refugees, asylum seekers, stateless persons, and IDPs, like equal access to chances because of a political status, because of the economic environment that they're living in. So what we have started to do back in 2015 is to understand how technology can challenge that status quo and can enable displaced persons to have access to more opportunities to fight for social justice. We've been targeting 5 key areas in which we believe and we've seen that technology can change the narrative, but also the behaviors and the access to opportunities, which are first access to information, meaning connectivity, knowing your rights, identity. The second pillar being education, so how to continue primary education, secondary education, how to learn languages, how to gain digital skills, how to recognize diplomas. The third being access to employment, so everything that is connected with financial inclusion, but also remote work. The fourth one being health, so how to access health services when you're speaking a different language, how to protect your data, medical data, how to access mental health support for post-traumatic syndromes, etc. And the fifth one is social inclusion, so how to access housing, how to get integrated in a new environment and facilitate cultural exchange. In those 5 areas, our chapters have been either ideating through hackathons, through various innovation and open innovation processes, so to create simple tools that could change this status quo, or working with existing tech solutions that are ethical, are sustainable, and that can scale and get implemented on the ground. So the kind of support that we bring to those projects is either technical support with our global community of developers, designers, entrepreneurs, but also implementation support to understand what needs to be adapted in those solutions so that they're relevant on the ground. Something that is really important, and I'll leave my colleague Kaula to explain to you a little bit more, is we talk a lot about tech for good and about tech innovation that can change the world. But as we're working with communities that can be marginalized and that needs to be involved in those innovations, you don't do tech innovations. You have to think about how to make it. And with Techfugees, we've published 8 guiding principles that are tips, important tips that any innovator must take into account in the design process, in the development process of such innovation. And we use it as a baseline and a collective information basis to choose the project that we're working with. I'll let Kaula tell you a bit more about what those guiding principles are.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise, for the great introduction. So my name is Haula, and as Louise mentioned, I'm working on the guiding principles of Techfugees. Maybe the first question that we can ask ourselves, why do we have guiding principles? So Louise already introduced this, but I would like just to remind, why do we have these? So yeah, what we want to achieve is to build a responsible and sustainable design, be mindful when we work with displaced persons, and also to keep in mind an ethical approach. So this is a representation of the 8 guiding principles that we have at Techfugees. So the first one is about human-centric design. The second one is about technology empowerment. The third one is data governance and transparency. The fourth is about open source. The fifth is inclusive tech. And the sixth is about sustainability. The seventh is human rights approach. And finally, the last one is no solutionism. Tech alone is not a solution. So when we see those 8 guiding principles, we can think about 3 different clusters where these are grouped. So the first one is about the design process. So what is the design process that we aim for once we would like to build those responsible and sustainable projects for displaced people? So this is basically around human-centered design, tech empowerment, the inclusive tech, the sustainability. This is mainly structured around the human as a center of the design, then the technology, and finally the resources to enable this sustainability aspect of the design. The second cluster, which is as important as the first one, is about data. So what do we do with data? How do we handle data? So we have here the data governance principle and the open source principle. And finally, the ethics, which should accompany the whole process from the beginning, to be mindful of the human rights of displaced people, of how they need to be considered once they leave their countries, their countries of origin. So as you see here, all those principles are interconnected. They are all linked with each other, and we cannot consider one apart from the other. So basically, the idea is to have all of these in mind and to see them as a whole and not as separate guiding principles. So what we are trying to do now is to build a knowledge database around all of these guiding principles. And here I'm just calling again for contribution. If anyone wants to support on building this knowledge database, we'll be happy to include you in all our discussions, and we will be happy also to have your support for us, because we would like this to be also participative approach where everybody can contribute. What we are building also, we are trying to gather and collect existing toolkits and try to see how we can apply those toolkits for Techfugees and for projects that are featured in Basefugees. And finally, what we would like to build is a framework around all those guiding principles and the 3 clusters that are already identified to help future projects build and think responsibly once they are designing for displaced people. And finally, what we aim for is to develop awareness sessions and to share best practices that we are gathering from different project founders around their experience with the guiding principle in the design and handling of data, and finally the ethical approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaula. These principles are important for us, not only because they're based on experience of what we saw working and what didn't work, but because it's also a big ask from the project owner and the innovator to be able to exchange with other innovators and learn from each other's. We've launched Basefugees, which is an open showcase of responsible innovations that we've been selecting based on these guiding principles that have a real impact on the ground and that are answering a real challenge. And we're using the guiding principle as this analytic grid to know what projects are working, which are the ones that we want to support through our chapters. So this platform is not only a virtual place for innovators to exchange with each other, because we saw a lot of duplication in the different tech projects that were answering the main displaced person challenges, but it's also a way for us to support and organize the volunteer community to support technically and with the implementation of those projects. So it gives visibility to this project, it helps promoting them, and it helps connecting with our network of partners that can help with the technical support and deep implementation. We're still at the MVP stage with this platform, which has been developed for the past years with volunteers from Colombia, Mexico, United States, France, and United Kingdom. And today we need your support to scale it. So we've launched a crowdfunding campaign called the Tech Down Borders crowdfunding campaign to really collect financial support to enable us to scale this platform, develop it further, and test it with 5 Catalyst projects, who are the 5 alpha users who will be giving us for the next 6 months feedback about the value that they get from Basefugees and how they are getting supported by the different chapters. Today, we're going to talk to you about those 5 projects that we've curated and chosen with the volunteers on the ground, with the chapters on the ground. So we'll start with the collaboration between Techfugees Uganda and Buffalo Green in Ramanja settlement, who will be presented by Benjamin, Vanessa, and moderated by Raj. Then we'll continue with Techfugees Kenya, who collaborated with the Kenya Red Cross to create a e-health application for a usage in Kakuma refugee camp. We'll continue with France, with Charania from Techfugees France and Alvaro from Refugee Infobus, moderated by Jérémy Garnier, about access to connectivity in the north of France in Calais. We'll continue with the team in Nigeria, who created with IDP Craft Women e-marketplace called Displaced People's Market. And we'll finish with Humans in the Loop, who collaborated with Techfugees in Lebanon to create remote work opportunities for displaced persons in Lebanon. Each of these fireside chat would last 15 minutes with the person representing Techfugees on the ground and a member of the project, and we'll explain to you what problem they're tackling, what is the context locally, how this collaboration happened, and also why they need funds and they need your support to go further.